Hi friends, welcome back to Dib Clinic. My name's Mike and I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist and first year trainee doctor in health psychology. In today's video we're going to have a look at how you can ace your upcoming psychology interviews. Let's get started. So as I've gone through my career in psychology, I've had to have many interviews over the years. So this includes from assistant psychology interviews to doctoral interviews, even to getting a job in psychotherapy. As I was going through these interviews, I often wondered if there was a method that I could use to get the best advantage at the time. And so that's why today I'm going to share my top tips for acing your interview and also introduce you to a method called the STAR technique. I think the four most important things when you're going to an interview include being yourself, remembering to reflect, keeping yourself calm, and preparing well in advance. So let's take a little look at these in a bit more depth. I think when we go for an interview, we have a slight predisposition to put on an act or pretend to be somebody that we're not. Ultimately, when you are going for a role, be it a university course or a job in psychology, really what the interviewers want to find out more about is you. And so don't be afraid to let your personality shine through. If you enjoy music, then share your interests with them. If there's a great book that you've been reading lately, don't be scared to share that with the interview panel. Secondly, it's really important to remember to reflect on incidents that have happened throughout your training or career. Often in psychology interviews, the panel aren't necessarily interested in what you've done, but more so what you've gained from the experience and what you can take from it moving forward. So this may be an interesting moment to implement a reflective cycle such as Gibbs, and really reflect on the moments that stand out to you and have contributed to your learning. Next up, I think keeping calm is a really important technique that we need to remember when we're going to interview. It's very easy to get trapped inside your own head and have quite a lot of worries about what the interview is going to be like and what the panel will think of you. But ultimately, if you're feeling quite stressed, quite worried and quite tense, there is a possibility that that's going to come through to the interviewers. So before you do start the interview, make sure you've taken a few moments to do some relaxing breathing or to have had a nice cup of tea, just so that you can help calm your mind and your thoughts for a moment. And finally, it's really important to remember to be prepared. Dependent on the interview that you're attending, you may have to prepare slightly different things. So if you're going for a clinical role, it may be useful to reflect on where you've used your clinical skills and how you've managed things such as risk. Whereas if you're going for a course at a university, it may be more useful to look at the values of the university and what the modules include on that specific course. And so now that we have some tips in how to approach your interview, let's take a look at a really great technique that allows you to follow a model and a structure to some of the answers that you'll be giving. I think that one of the best techniques for answering behavioural interview questions is something called the STAR technique. And STAR stands for Situation, Task, Action and Result. What this means is when you're asked a question, the first thing that you do is reflect on the situation. So this is really setting the scene and giving the necessary background information to the example that you're going to provide. Once we've provided the situation, we discuss the task. And the task is what your personal responsibility was in the situation. So this can discuss your job role or what your responsibilities were. This can lay out what your specific roles and duties were within that role and what you needed to do. And so this brings us on to action. And action is where we discuss what we actually did within the situation. So this is a great opportunity to show aspects of your clinical skills or knowledge and really allows you to showcase your skills as a practitioner or as a trainee. And finally, this brings us to result. This is where we discuss the outcomes of the action that we took in that moment. In part, result is one of the most important components of the STAR technique. So this is a really great moment to show how you can reflect on the things that you've done. Often what the interview panel wants you to show is how you've used previous knowledge and previous actions to inform your current practice. So by reflecting on these moments, we can really show what we've learned and how we may do things differently in the future. So now that we've outlined the STAR technique, let's take an example. So one question that's come up through many of my interviews is, can you tell us about a situation where you've had to handle a high-risk client? So let's see if we can answer this question. So when I was working as an assistant psychologist in 2019, I was working within a private organisation providing person-centred counselling and cognitive behavioural therapy. Within this role, I managed a caseload of 9 clients and the majority of them were experiencing either anxiety or depression, and quite a large number of those individuals had tendencies for suicidal ideation. In particular, I was working with one client who was experiencing quite negative emotional distress, and they were also using quite a lot of substances to manage their emotions. My responsibility at that time was to ensure that this person was safe and to make sure that they weren't going to be a harm to themselves. The main actions that I took when working with this client was firstly we put in a safety plan. So this was to ensure that if the individual was experiencing quite severe emotional distress, that they had a guide or a template that they could work through. Another really important component of this was that I was in discussions with the GP, as well as a multidisciplinary team of psychiatrists and psychologists. So this really made sure that that person was protected at the time and that we had the relevant individuals required for their care. Ultimately, after working with this client for a while, we were able to really modify the thoughts and the beliefs that they were having about themselves, as well as implementing some coping and management techniques for the distress. I think that this was a really important learning experience for me, and it definitely showed that working within a team is a great way to support individuals going through therapy. If I had to change one thing about that, I think that maybe I would have implemented more distress tolerance skills from dialectical behavioural therapy. And this is because we were mainly focused on the thoughts, but I think now it could have been really useful to implement some of those techniques a little sooner. And so hopefully you can see how we use the STAR technique to systematically work through the question and provide an answer that the interviewers are going to find engaging and useful. If you have any interview skills that you think are really effective, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I hope that you'll find this video useful for your next interview, whether it be at university or working in psychology. And stay tuned for more interview and application tips coming soon. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.